Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. My name is Ian Hamilton. I'm in New York, and I'm joined today by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios. I'm wearing a Quest 3 with hand tracking and meta avatars, and this is our final pre-scheduled episode before MetaConnect. It's a pre-recorded episode today, as David is traveling for an embargo, and I will also be doing the same later this week as well. As we record this, I've just come from the VR Games cast with Don Hopper, where I mentioned that it feels like we're hitting our stride over there. And we talked about Airspace Defender, which is basically missile command in space with hand tracking. And we also talked about pets in VR with Bogo, the creator of Bogo. We had them in our audience to talk about that. The next episode we officially have here in this studio is likely to include quite a large number of hands-on impressions for us to walk through with our audience. Now is the perfect time to share an Upload VR discussion with your friends, as we expect them to be hit in all directions pretty soon by the prospect of Quest 3S and its low-cost entry point to VR. So we expect a lot of questions about VR from a lot of people in the very near future. And our members up here at Upload VR help us answer those questions, and you can be part of answering those questions for people as well. So, David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So, apologies that this is a pre recorded episode, but by the time this airs, I will be at the event to try Immersed's Visor. And we won't talk about that this week because I haven't gone to see it yet, but hopefully, we have time next week to discuss my impressions. And I hope by the weekend to have my hands on impressions on uploadvr.com. So, today we're going to talk about 5 topics. We're going to talk about Sony fixing the big issue we had with PlayStation VR2 on PC, which was the weird rotational distortion issue. We will then talk about some of the Quest 3S leaks we've seen. This headset is one of Meta's most leaked ever, which is saying something given how much all of their previous headsets leaked as well. We'll talk about how Meta's own support page revealed that it has an action button to toggle pass through, and we'll talk about the comprehensive photo leaks that show it from every conceivable angle and reveal its battery size and lack of headphone jack. We'll then move on to talk about VisionOS 2, which just released for Apple Vision Pro. We've talked about the betas before, but it's now publicly out for all Vision Pro owners, and it is a massive upgrade. It brings significant improvements to Apple Vision Pro. We will then talk about AR glasses, 2 very different devices. The first is RayNeo X2, which you can go out and buy if you want, technically, for $850 today. It's a real product that exists, but as we'll talk about, it has significant compromises to be a real AR glasses product in 2024. We'll then talk about Snap's Spectacles that they just announced, which is a developer kit. It's only for developers. It costs $99 a month, and you don't even own them. You're renting them for that $99. We'll talk about what all this means for how far away consumer AR glasses are that you could buy for a reasonable price and where the state of AR glasses is today.
So I like that you said at the beginning of your intro there that we aren't going to talk about the visor this week. And I like to imagine what our commenters are saying in the discussion, because they are such an integral part of this show. And I'm imagining they're relieved that you're going to see the visor, and that is our plan. So I know they've been asking that in the past, in previous weeks. So I imagine they're happy that we're going out there to actually set eyes on this thing. We have been long-standing skeptics of the sort of effort there. So getting the unveiling will be there. David Heaney's eyes will be there, and we've planned that for quite a while to make that happen. I like your description on this rundown here of the RayNeo XR2 review. I kind of heard it as definitely a product that exists. I think that was the takeaway headline in my brain from your description just now. It'll be fun to talk about that one. And then I'm very excited to talk about the spectacles at the end of the show, which feels like what the RayNeo X2 kind of purports to be and isn't. But let's get to that at the end of the show and begin here with Sony fixing this problem that you talked about in your initial breakdown of the PlayStation VR 2 on PC adapter. So, David, walk us through this, please.
So we're about a month out from the launch of the PlayStation VR 2 PC adapter. By a month out, I mean it's been a month since it's launched. Slightly confusing language there from me. But there was one major issue we noted in our review. Obviously, we covered the differences between OLED and LCD, this being an OLED headset, all its competitors being LCD headsets, with the exception of Apple Vision Pro, which uses micro OLED at a much more expensive price. But we noted that there was something happening here that wasn't happening on PlayStation 5. And I'm not talking about the missing features like eye tracking and precision haptics and high dynamic range. I was talking about this strange issue where when I rotated my head side to side, there was this kind of vertical distortion where straight vertical lines would start to bend. And your first thought may be, oh, surely that's reprojection, right? It sounds like reprojection. And my initial first thought was sure, but then I went and turned off all of the possible reprojection systems on PC and noticed it was still there. And of course, this was happening even in the most basic low detail scenes. And it wasn't happening with any other VR headset on my PC. So I reached out to Sony about this at the time and we informed them of the issue. I also heard from our industry colleagues at Road to VR that they had experienced the same issue with PlayStation VR 2 on PC. And the news now is that Sony has fixed it. They've released a firmware update for the headset. It fixes this issue. I confirmed that it fixes this issue. I've plugged it in. I've run this update. It's gone. That issue is solved. The update also allows AMD graphics card users to switch between 90 and 120 hertz. Previously, only NVIDIA users could switch the refresh rate. And separately, TP-Link has made available a special firmware update for its Bluetooth USB adapter that it said could fix the lag issues some people were experiencing. So The Verge actually had this issue with their review. They were using this TP-Link Bluetooth adapter to connect these controllers because unfortunately the PC adapter that Sony gives you doesn't connect the controllers and nor does the headset, despite their claims of that this was made with PC in mind from the start. I think that's clearly not true. Hopefully.
I'm ready to do battle. Let's do it. All right, no, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah. I mean, the good news is that if you are using that TP-Link adapter, and this is a very, very popular adapter, TP-Link says this will probably fix your issue. So Sony has come out with multiple fixes across the board here. Their firmware update for the headset, TP-Link's update to potentially fix the controller issues. And now this becomes a lot easier to recommend as a PC VR headset. For me, this now just comes down to, do you prefer the rich and deep but soft and noisy image of PSVR 2's OLED? Or do you prefer the sharp and clear but dull and muted offering of its LCD competitors? It's a personal preference question. Unfortunately, for the people who want us to say that one is overall best, neither of these is overall best. They excel in different areas. They suck in certain areas. It's a frustrating situation, but that's the market we're in today. Between this OLED option and its LCD competitors, there are these trade-offs.
Your decision about whether you pick one headset or the other for PC is going to be probably dictated by other factors other than this difference between OLED and not OLED. There are bigger things to consider this day in the VR market. The biggest one is coming up next. It's our next subject, right? Like, we've got to discuss the price difference that's going to be apparent in the next product and how it connects to PC. And right now, the price difference between an Apple Vision Pro and a Quest 3 is $3,000. And that's the difference between OLED and not OLED. And yeah, the OLED is great in an Apple Vision Pro, but it's not the deciding factor in why I would go and pick one instead of a Quest 3. And honestly, it's not. It's, I Quest 3 wins in most categories, right?
So there are certainly other factors, but I think if you're specifically looking for a VR headset to use with your PC and you're choosing between Quest 3 and PlayStation VR 2, and you assume that you want wired, right? Because Quest 3 can be wireless, but this thing is always going to be wired. If you assume that you're just looking for a wired PC VR headset, a traditional path to PC VR, and you're choosing between these two headsets, the pricing is quite similar, right? You're talking $550 plus some cables and adapters for the PlayStation VR 2, or $500 plus a better head strap, most likely, maybe some other accessories for your Quest 3. That's going to be a very similar price there. Of course, when it comes to Quest 3S launching, as we'll talk about next, then that becomes a lower cost option there, and you're comparing Fresnel to Fresnel. But I do think if you are that particular kind of person who's looking for this wired headset just for PC, it does come down to OLED vs LCD for PSVR 2 versus Quest 3.
I'm still going to hold out hope of a message from Gabe Newell in New Zealand straight to the Valve channel announcing Steam on PlayStation. But I can only dream of that right now. That's my own personal reality, not yours, and not yours in our audience. So I'll just keep that to myself and hope for it. But I won't expect it anytime soon, because that is the one that would actually, I think, ship PlayStation VR2 headsets right now.
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of things you can kind of hope for in the market. And, a Valve headset, for example, Valve bringing Alex to PSVR2, all of these kind of things. But when we make recommendations, we have to make recommendations about what exists today, plus what reliable sources say is coming in the next few months. And we can't really make a purchasing decision based on what might happen. There's been rumors about Valve making a new headset, for example, for years now. In fact, it's beyond rumors, right? We know they are working on one. But when they actually decide to ship that as a product, nobody knows. And you could have made a decision 2 years ago to not buy a headset and wait for Valve. And you'd be sitting here 2 years later, wasting that entire time without VR. So that's the difficulty of making a decision like that.
Do we want to be more robust in what we say about our recommendations of whether you go and get a Quest 3, Quest 3S, PSVR 2, or something else right now? Like, how is it changed by the fact that this adapter is that much improved just in a few weeks' time?
Yeah, I think it really only changes that one narrow scenario I was pointing out, where if you want a wired PC VR headset and you don't care about standalone and you don't care about wireless, then PSVR 2 is actually now a very compelling option if you want the richness of OLED and you can accept the softness in the Mura, right? Last week, we had commenters in the comments of this show saying, I am willing to accept that trade-off of the Mura and the softness to get that OLED contrast, because it is incredible, to be clear, right? When I was using this thing on my PC, I was blown away remembering about how great OLED colors and OLED contrast looks. There are entire areas of VR games in darkness where LCD displays literally just crush out all the detail below a certain brightness level, right? It's not that it gets worse, it just disappears. You lose it entirely. And in OLED, you see all of that richness, and every color is punchier and better. And it's really a dramatic difference that matters. But again, frustratingly, it comes with its own trade-offs.
All right. Well, I'll take it as a win for UploadVR as a whole if we either see Half-Life Alyx or Steam on PSVR 2, but that is not our recommendation. That is not reality. And that is a narrow window you described of people. I like to imagine that the one key factor that I was really wondering about there, David, was movie watching. If you're going to be in that narrow window of people, what is the movie watching experience from, say, I don't know, a disk drive, a Blu-ray disk drive in your PC to a PSVR 2? Is that a solid experience? Does it work well? Does it not work? That's because that's what you're talking about getting if you're leaving your PS5 behind. Like, now is the time I'm getting into PC VR. Oh, it's 2025. I'm going to go grab a PSVR 2 headset for my PC. And where's all my media, right? Like, what other things can I do with it? And, PS5 actually offers a fair number of things that you can access inside that headset.
Yeah, after Connect, we will definitely make some recommendation articles that talk about which headsets are best to get going into the holiday season. But as I said in my Apple Vision Pro review, I don't think any of the headsets before it had sufficient resolution to make this a more compelling way to watch movies than just your giant 4K TV in your living room, right? Apple Vision Pro is the first one that has the resolution and the sharpness and all of the other aspects that make this work. With PSVR 2, I don't think on that kind of soft, noisy display, I would want to watch something like a movie, especially given it's only 2K per eye, right? So you're watching a 1080p image with Mura through Fresnel lenses. I don't think that's the way anyone really wants to watch movies, with maybe the exception of a few enthusiasts.
Mhm. Sorry, I just while you're talking there, and I don't have the commenters to distract me, I get more distracted in my brain. But now I want Steam OS on the next Sony headset. All right, I'm ready to go there. I'm ready to dream. All right, let's go to the next subject, David. Quest 3S leaks. What do we know is the latest here? And keep in mind, this is pre-recorded, and Meta is a very leaky ship. So by the time this publishes, there is always the chance they could have leaked more because they leak everywhere. David, what is the latest we know or suspect to know about this headset, which is going to be revealed a few days after we publish this post?
Yeah, I agree with you that there is a very high chance that by the time you're watching this, there will have been more leaks of this thing, because this thing is just leaked left, right, and center. It's been leaking for over a year. At this point, we're getting a new leak every couple of days. We pretty much think at this point that we know everything about this headset, and that sounds hubristic. And
which is scary, right? Like we hate to go
yeah,
out on this limb, but the paper trail is strong. This image itself was put into the firmware of the system, right? Right, by Meta.
yeah. So we'll talk about these kind of these leaks here, but as we did talk about last week, this was in the Meta Quest Link PC file. So not the headset firmware, but the PC app used for Quest Link. This image here of the headset was in it. So this isn't some speculative render or guess. This is directly from Meta's own software. And if you haven't been following this Quest 3S story, there are essentially two ways to describe it from two different angles. You could either say that it's a Quest 2 with Quest 3's chipset, mixed reality capabilities, and controllers, or you could say it's a Quest 3 with Quest 2's lenses and display. It is a midpoint hybrid of Quest 2 and Quest 3 that basically gives you the capabilities of Quest 3, but through the lenses and display of Quest 2. And so the new leaks this week are that a Meta support page went up describing this headset in multiple ways. And the one that revealed something new about it was the one that talked about pass-through. So if you have a Quest 2 or a Quest Pro or a Quest 3, you can double tap the side of your headset to activate pass-through at any time. Say someone walks into your room and you need to pause the VR game you're in and just see them. You double tap your headset. Now, this is a finicky and unreliable gesture. I really dislike it personally. And Meta seems to agree, because with this headset, according to their own support documentation, this little button right here is called the action button. And by pressing that button, not double tapping, you can toggle into pass through at any time. And it's kind of a little bit of a riff on Vision Pro's dial where you can scroll into pass through, except this is just a button to toggle between immersive and pass through. So that was the first leak that we saw from this week. And then another leak we saw revealed a whole bunch of images of the headset, what looked to be real photographs of the thing in real life, not a render, that shows it from every conceivable angle. And you can see that it matches the same design that you see in the Meta Quest Link PC files, the same design we've seen leaked for months now. You can quite clearly see that these are Fresnel lenses that look to be very similar, if not identical, to Quest 2's Fresnel lenses. And yet the USB-C port is in the same position as Quest 3. You also see those side cameras, the same as Quest 3, which are used for hand tracking, controller tracking, and also used for inside-out body tracking. And as Ian is pointing out right now, the thing that you notice is missing is a headphone jack. There is no 3.5 millimeter headphone jack apparent in any of these images. And that means that if you want audio that is private and higher quality than the built-in speakers on this headset, you'll need to use USB-C audio or Bluetooth. Bluetooth is not really viable for immersive gaming because it has too high latency. Spatial audio doesn't work if the latency is too high, and Bluetooth goes beyond that latency. So if you want low latency, high quality private audio, you'll need to invest in a USB-C solution. That could just be $10 USB-C headphones from Amazon, or it could be a more expensive wireless earbuds that transmit lossless high quality audio over USB-C, such as the Anker ones that Meta partnered with Anker to release, which I think are sold currently at $100. Now, just before we discuss this, the other thing that was leaked in these same images was the regulatory label, which reveals the size of the battery. And what this reveals is that it's pretty much squarely between Quest 2 and Quest 3 in battery size. And so when you consider that this thing is going to draw more power than a Quest 2 because it has those mixed reality sensors and higher peak performance GPU, but less than a Quest 3 because it doesn't need to have really bright displays to push through the low optical efficiency of the pancake displays, we would expect this thing to have pretty much the same battery life as a Quest 2 or Quest 3. Based on what we see here, there shouldn't be a significant difference either way.
I was joking with Don and Beck over on the Gamescast. We have a different audio setup for recording that show than we have here. On one of our podcasts, David tried to go with external audio directly to the headset. It went badly because it seems like anytime Meta adds some new feature to these headsets, as soon as you try to take it to its max and actually use it in a production setting, you encounter the real world monstrous issues that seem to pop up, and one of those is constantly audio switching the things. So David, to solve one of our audio issues, he recommended a 3.5 millimeter pair of headphones. So super easy to just put into a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack. And it's no extra wire. They just dangle. One goes over the left side and one is on the right side. And it's what I'm using now to prevent feedback back into the headset of the microphone. And it's just going to live near this headset. That was my intention. But on the other show, we're routing the audio in a completely different way to our podcast listeners, and it's causing problems. Well, my solution there is going to be very soon to have a USB hub that goes to my Quest headset. And on that USB hub will be a 3.5 millimeter out up to this headset with an extension cord. I'll have a 3.5 millimeter extension cord because what I'm seeing in this Quest 3S leak is that, as God intended, we will have 3.5 millimeter jacks out of our USB hubs, which are probably at our hips, no longer on our headsets. Am I understanding that right? That that's probably the likeliest place is going to be at your hip for a 3.5 millimeter jack?
I think that's certainly a possibility, but I think the vast majority of people will use this headset with the built-in speaker audio, and some will get that anchor solution that you just plug in this tiny little dongle into your USB-C port, and then you have these wireless earbuds, AirPod style. The big issue, of course, for most people with just having a USB-C port is that they won't be able to listen privately and charge at the same time. But again, I don't think the majority of Quest owners do charge and play at the same time. I think the majority of Quest owners have nothing in either of these ports, and I think Meta probably has the data to support that. It's a disappointing decision, right? Because it's bad that it takes away choices from people, and in an ideal world, you would have it. But this headset is designed to be as cheap as possible while still having all of the capabilities of Quest 3. And they're going to be making compromises left, right, and center. I imagine this thing feels cheap in the hand. I imagine there are, some material compromises here. This is all about being low cost. There are going to be a lot of complaints about this headset in this regard, right? The Fresnel lenses, aren't the pancake lenses. But the reality is, if you want those things, you get a Quest 3, right? That's what Quest 3 is for at $500. I'm not saying $500 is cheap, but it's not Apple Vision Pro pricing either. It is, if someone could afford a Quest 3S, then they could save up if they really, really want a Quest 3. But this is the headset for people who don't want to do that, who just want the cheapest headset possible. And that means there are going to be some compromises.
I've just spent a lot of time, David, trying to figure out all the things you can hook into a Quest 3 because of the HDMI link. You pointed out that we've written a couple articles along those lines, but it's kind of mind-boggling how much content you can bring into a Quest headset that was simply locked away a few weeks earlier. And we write for an audience of people who may actually be in the market for a Vision Pro. Like, there are people legitimately watching our show who are in that target market, who might actually go out and buy one. They might have the investment plan in place to invest in their future, to get that dev kit and get out there and try building something for it. So we're like ready made to have those people who might legitimately go out and get that thing. And so when we are talking to that audience or thinking of them, they've got a bunch of stuff that they can do completely wirelessly on the Vision Pro. Really, really cool to have your Mac Virtual Display on one button right from your control bar, and then have the things that we're talking about later in the show that are now there with VisionOS 2. But what has happened with Quest and what I've messed around with in the last few weeks is it's almost like Quest has destroyed personal computing and rebuilt it inside of the headset. You've got a new, fresh personal computer inside your headset, and you can rebuild a PC out behind your headset, almost like it's a tail for the headset itself. And all it is a mishmash of USB dongle cords and long USB HDMI connectors. What you've pointed out here with this breakdown is if this thing really doesn't have a headphone jack on it, there is one more thing to now go put on this USB hub that gets power in, like you said, but also potentially brings in a Steam Deck, an iPhone, a computer, and it's all wired and local to you. So we talk for that audience that's going and spending $5,000 or $6,000 on a MacBook Air and a Vision Pro, and that's super cool for them to be able to do the Mac Virtual Display anywhere. But next week, we're going to have to think about that audience of people who are getting their first computer for the very first time. And maybe they've got a phone. Maybe they've gotten a phone from a family member, or maybe a tablet even. They could actually pair those things up. You're talking $800, $900 total hardware. And a kid out there has their tablet now inside of their VR headset. And the thing that made it possible is this silly little thing I described at the beginning of this monologue, which is a tail growing out the back of your Quest 3S or your Quest 3. That's just this ridiculous hub of USB cords and whatnot. And it's just funny to have headphones now removed from the headset the same way Apple was criticized for removing that from phones.
Yeah, the one thing I wonder here when it comes to the audio solution, I take your point about what you're saying. It is definitely true that this stuff will become a lot lower cost with Quest 3S, and people who have this low cost hardware can kind of patch it together like this if they want to. The one thing I wonder about audio specifically is, will we see Meta release some sort of custom audio protocol, right? That's what Apple did with Vision Pro with only its own product. If you use the AirPods Pro second generation on Vision Pro, it bypasses Bluetooth's normal audio and does this custom Apple protocol to have low latency, lossless audio. And it's people don't really talk about this enough. It's only for Vision Pro and AirPods. You can't do it with your iPhone or your Mac or your iPad. They've developed this specifically for the headset. I wonder if we'll see Meta do something like that, where maybe there will be Meta buds of some sort, because you could even imagine Meta buds being a thing for the Ray-Ban glasses as well, right? Where you want to go private and keep the same audio system they come across. I wonder if this is a play towards that, because then you would still keep your USB-C port available on the headset while having this protocol. And what makes this easier?
That's a really good call. Yeah, it's a good idea.
Short, right?
Yeah,
because like this isn't a massive engineering challenge. You're not trying to do this at 100 meters. You're trying to do this at like a couple of inches, right? A couple of centimeters even. And that's what makes it possible.
That's a fantastic idea. Fantastic idea that pulls together two ideas. I've been out to Meta's offices and I saw demos. I did a demo, a really, really good demo with their audio technology, where they demonstrated like the basic framework that they would need to do this sort of thing. And prior to that, they also did that briefing with, I think Michael Abrash was even there in the briefing with journalists, where they described perceptual superpowers, this idea of almost having super hearing that you could, one way of describing it is be in a conversation in a very loud place. Arguably, that's happening right now as we record this. I am in New York, and I'm hearing all of the street sounds outside. And if we've done the audio recording right, we filtered that out before it even reaches your ears. Well, now Apple has done that in real, like that's their most recent updates for their operating system, is to do this conversation awareness and tune out the outside distracting world for people anywhere, like the little cone of silence, if you ever remember Get Smart. That idea you could have that almost anywhere using the same pipeline. So it's a very, very good idea that you're describing. A lot of internal research that Meta has shown and talked about for years could be realized in a product like that would offer real benefits for Quest users in the very, very near future. So I would love to see that surprise announcement, and you can do your dance of victory if you really predicted an announcement like that. Also, I want Meta legs, but we're not going to recap that one right now. Let's
Well, I
talk about the
think,
next subject.
yeah, I'm sure we'll see some avatar updates at Connect. But yeah, let's move on to the next topic being VisionOS 2. As I mentioned at the start of the show, this is something that we have talked about for months now because it was announced and released in the first beta at WWDC back in June. But we now have the full public release. It is out there for every Apple Vision Pro owner, and it brings a bunch of improvements that no single one of them is a massive, enormous improvement, but together they really increase the usability and functionality of the headset. And it makes me excited to see what we're going to see in the future, right? We're now on iOS 18. Think of where VisionOS will be by version 18. It's really just the start of a very long journey. And as we see here in Apple's kind of signature chart for this, you can turn any 2D photo into a spatial photo. It works really remarkably well. It takes only a few seconds. I'm surprised they were able to pull this off on device, and yet they have. We have a new Bora Bora environment. It's a beach environment that looks great. Travel mode now works on trains. You can rearrange apps in the home view. They've copied shamelessly the MetaQuest home gesture where you open up your hand and pinch to bring up home. It's a lot better than having to reach up to the button each time, the digital crown. I really hated that about VisionOS 1. We have the ability to save the details of a guest user. So if you live with a spouse or just a flatmate or a family member or a coworker that's constantly using your headset, you don't have to go through hands and eye setup every single time. That was a pain with the VisionOS 1. Great to see them fix that. We have keyboard breakthroughs. So when you're in a fully immersive environment, you can still see your keyboard there in front of you via the pass-through cameras. Very, very useful. Mouse support. This is a huge one that really went not talked about enough, I think. The ability to actually, as well as your keyboard, have a physical mouse, not just a trackpad. It makes this a much more viable spatial computer. AirPlay receiver, and this is an enormous one. You've just talked about bringing in those other devices into this headset. Well, wirelessly and in one tap, you can now bring in your iPhone or your iPad straight into your Vision headset. From launch, you've been able to do that with your Mac, but now you can do it with your iPhone, and that brings all of your iPhone apps, especially the ones that aren't available in the VisionOS App Store, in there to the headset. The biggest feature for Mac is not shipping at launch, though. It's quite disappointing to see, and that's the Mac Virtual Display Ultra Wide Mode. Apple tells us this will come in a future update to VisionOS 2, but it will be part of VisionOS 2 eventually. We also have Tabletop Kit, which allows developers to make tabletop board game style games a lot easier. Enterprise APIs, specifically the most interesting one is the fact that enterprises for non-public internal apps can now access Vision Pro's pass-through cameras and run their own custom models there for computer vision. And then there are some updates that weren't announced here, but we did cover in UploadVR. One of them being that hand tracking is majorly improved. It's higher update rate and lower latency. It really is a night and day difference and changes the kind of games that people can make. Hand tracking is now really good, and beforehand it really wasn't. You also have stationary object tracking. So you can actually track three-dimensional objects with a massive caveat. The developer has to pre-bake them into the app. So it has to be a pre-known object that the developer spends. It takes about 6 hours to bake it into the app at compile time, or just before compile time, I should say. But it is useful for certain business use cases. For example, And then there are also improvements to scene understanding. So it'll tell the developer that you changed room, which room you're in. It'll mark out the walls and the ceiling, and it'll also be able to do slanted planes, all of that kind of better understanding of the environment around you. So all of these changes, minor each one of them, but together just really pick away at the pain points of Apple Vision Pro and make this a better headset to use.
The widescreen Mac Virtual Display will be the killer standout feature here. If, for the first year here, or better part of the first year, their big selling point for this headset was use it on a plane with a big virtual display or a big giant TV. Well, this is the critical feature to do lots of work anywhere on any plane, and that's a critical thing. I hope we've got Apple people in our audience, people that work at Apple, paying attention to our feedback. I imagine, like we've suggested this before, David, I think Meta learns from Apple, Apple learns from Meta. I think they're learning from each other at this point. And that's why I focused on this in my explanation is they're both going to skate to the same place. They're both going to start taking, they're going to look a lot like each other over time. We're about to see a whole slew of updates that Meta is going to plan over its next year for its ecosystem. We have yet to see what the next phase of Apple updates are. And I think what you sort of hinted at with your fade off statement here is I think there's a lot more Apple can do that will really surprise people in the next year.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I'm really looking forward specifically to that ultra wide Mac virtual display feature. We're really keen to get our hands on that as soon as it's available. One of the pitches of headsets for expanding your laptop has been this idea of taking this tiny 13-inch screen and expanding it into a giant screen, but it's of the same aspect ratio. And one of the solutions there has been in Immersed, for example, and in Meta's Horizon Workrooms, you can spawn these entirely virtual extra monitors. So you turn your laptop into a triple screen solution. And Apple has kind of looked at this and said, instead of that, why would you still have the bezels between the monitors if you're in a virtual system, right? Why would you need to have that? That's a holdover. Why not just give you one giant ultra wide system where you can position these monitors or these windows wherever you want within these monitors? So it's a really interesting solution that really depends on having this kind of end-to-end hardware software control. And one of the things I just love about Mac Virtual Display is this fact that it does create a dedicated Wi-Fi direct connection between the headset and the Mac. I never shut up about this because it is just so cool, because you're on a plane and you try to do this with your Quest and you'll realize that it's trying to find a Wi-Fi connection to route it through, just like many of the wireless streaming solutions today, where Apple, everything just works, right? You look at it, you see this little virtual button hovering on top of the Mac's display, and you click it and boom, it creates that network connection. It has everything ready to go. It's high quality, it's low latency. You don't even know all the magic that just happened under the hood, and everything's ready to go. And I understand you like your cables, but I love the fact that there's not a single cable involved.
No, you're right. But like, how does it work with massive amounts of interference or with devices that aren't from the same family? That's where things get really interesting. VisionOS is a great command center, and so is Horizon. It is a command center for all of the devices around you, and they're getting better every day. Can't wait to see what other things are in store for that in the future. But the next subject here on our list here is something that seems to promise to be that thing. It seems to promise to be useful to you in ways that it doesn't actually deliver on. I think VR headsets do deliver on its promises more often than not, even though Meta and Apple are building to those tools right now. This is one that I don't think delivers, David, on what it promises to deliver. Is that right?
Yeah, so we often describe VR and mixed reality headsets as being early, but at the same time, they are a real market that are serving tens of millions of people at this point, and we expect that soon tens of millions of more people will join in. And they are a product that you can go out and buy and get some utility out of without feeling that you've bought in decades too early for most people, right? But when we talk about AR glasses being early, we're talking about a much, much earlier stage. I would argue that AR glasses are perhaps 15 or 20 years behind where mixed reality headsets are now in terms of their technology capability readiness. And so RayNeo X2, which I just reviewed, are really an example of what happens when you try to build truly standalone AR glasses in 2024 in the glasses form factor. So you can see here, this is me wearing them. You can see that they technically are glasses form factor, right? They are just at the limit of what you could describe as a true pair of glasses. And yet you can also see that they are quite large for what they are, right? Here are some images comparing the RayNeo X2 glasses to the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. You have the RayNeo X2 on the left and the Ray-Ban Meta glasses on the right. And even the Ray-Ban Meta glasses would be considered quite large glasses by many people, with a thicker frame than the lightest glasses that you get. And they weigh in at around 50 grams, whereas these RayNeo X2 glasses that we reviewed, these AR glasses, come in at 120 grams. So we're talking more than double the weight, but there's obviously a massive capability increase. These things have a display. They have a micro LED display. In fact, as far as I'm aware, the first consumer product that doesn't cost tens of thousands of dollars that has a micro LED display. We're not talking about some fancy version of LCD here, and we're not talking about micro OLED. We mean that true next generation display technology that you've been hearing about for years now, micro LED. The trade-off being that these are 480p micro LED displays. These are not high resolution. But the other thing is that this has a very tiny field of view of just 25 degrees. So the angular resolution is roughly equivalent to a Quest 3. But of course, the field of view you get that within is very narrow. And so this is like a really complicated product in many ways, because the pitch here is that this is technically the first AR glasses you can take outdoors, walk around in your day, will give you utility in the same way that any other device that you would bring around with you in your daily activities would, and that it's in a fully standalone form factor and it can do things like navigation and translation, these promised use cases of AR glasses. The problem is that it really is only on paper AR, because when you try the augmented reality on this, it's really terrible. The field of view is so small that unless you're looking directly at a virtual object, you're going to completely lose it and you're going to be looking around wondering where it was. But worse, the positional tracking on these things is the worst that I have tried in the past decade. It really is woeful. It's not even close to good. It's worse than you would even imagine in terms of actually keeping the object position. It will float all around the place. I checked that this wasn't a glitch by, I cleaned the camera, I reset the device, I looked online at forums and saw that other people were encountering this. It just looks like either it's their tracking software, it's the fact that there's only one camera, maybe it's just the fact that they had to downclock the chip so much to get it to fit into these glasses arms to get it to work. This is actually the Snapdragon XR2, the same chip that's in Quest 2, but with a much smaller battery and lower thermal dissipation and no cooling fan. It looks like they've had to downclock this thing quite a lot. Now, that said, if you ignore the AR part of this, which I think they've just done to get in the history books, because as I keep saying, technically, this is the first standalone true AR glasses, as in a standalone glasses form factor product that doesn't need an external device of any kind to generally operate, that can do 6 degrees of freedom tracking and project objects into your space. Again, it's terrible at that. But if you ignore that, these are actually an interesting product as smart glasses with a HUD. We've talked about how reports indicate that next year in 2025, Meta will launch smart glasses with a HUD. We've talked about the fact that Google teased them at its I/O conference. It showed these smart glasses that had this heads-up display. In both cases, Google and Meta look like their main use case for it is AI, to show you the output of their AI assistant as text in front of you instead of having to hear it each time, as well as obviously for notifications. So one of the things you can do with these glasses is also an AI assistant, but it's just weird. There's something so weird about it. You have to launch an app. It has like a avatar persona. It talks to you like it's a character. I find it just kind of off-putting, and the fact that it has to be up there as a headlocked HUD character was just downright strange. But what this can do that your Ray-Ban glasses can't do is give you notifications as text in front of you, right? So someone texts you, instead of hearing an assistant say, there's a new text from this person. Do you want to read it out? You see their name, you see the first few lines of the text in front of you, and you can decide then whether you want to open that on your phone or not. It's similar to the use case you would have for your smartwatch, but it's in a heads-up display. Now, in practice, it's really quite distracting for something to be right in the center of your display. I would much rather be able to put it in the top, the corner, the bottom, the side, wherever I want, rather than right in front of me. The same thing is true with navigation, the other kind of key smart use case of the display here. You get this mini map that's like video game style. You get an arrow pointing at where you need to go, but it's headlocked. It's a fixed HUD. It's not AR. Very few of the capabilities of this product use AR. In most ways, it is just these HUD glasses. The most interesting capability I saw of this was translation, and this does use AR. And the idea is you put in your language, you select the language using the touchpad on the side of the glasses, which is finicky, and I'll talk about in a little second. You look at somebody's face that's speaking that language, and you'll see these very delayed and often not perfectly accurate subtitles. It's a glimpse of a very different future where language becomes no longer a barrier, because one day everyone's going to be wearing glasses like these that have these subtitles automatically without even having to do any of this finicky input. But it's only a glimpse right now. It's a novelty. The software on this thing is just clunky. The controls on the side of the touchpad don't feel great. It doesn't feel good to swipe along a menu with a touchpad on the side of glasses and tap to enter and double tap to go back. It feels like using a really laggy TV's interface by pressing the buttons on the TV rather than using a remote. Do you ever try to configure something on a television and spend 20 minutes doing what would take 15 seconds on a remote? That's kind of what the experience feels like. And they do give you this little ring that you can use instead. It goes in your finger and you swipe with your thumb, but it doesn't fix this problem at all. In fact, it's worse because the touchpad is tiny and the ring is too thick for you to ever want to really wear it. So it doesn't solve the problem at all. What this really underscored to me, not only was the software here a huge limit, but the input. What this really underscores to me is how important input is for glasses. And we'll talk soon about what Snap's solution is here. But what I can say for certain is that without a clever solution to input, by just trying to use swipe gestures and bringing that in to a HUD and AR, it's not going to work. And this is something that needs to be focused on more. But the concluding thoughts I'll give here is just, from a hardware perspective, it's impressive, right? What we will say about Snap's spectacles, even though they're more impressive in many ways, is that they are not in this true glasses form factor. We'll show some images of people wearing those Snap glasses, and the reaction I've seen most on the internet is, damn, those things are ugly. They're twice the weight of this. So everything we can say about the expanded capabilities of spectacles compared to this, that we will talk about in a moment, has to be taken in the context that, firstly, these things are cheaper. These are $850. They're a real product that anyone can buy, and they are in just at the limits of what I would call socially acceptable. You could walk around with these things and you may get a few looks of, wow, they're wearing quite big glasses. You know, I've shown that image again where they are bigger than your regular pair of glasses, but I think you could just about get away with looking a bit hipster or quirky. Whereas, as we'll talk about next, with Snap's glasses, you're not walking down the street with those things without it looking very bizarre.
Yep. I wanted to let you get through that whole explanation because I really didn't want to talk about the RayNeos, really. So you tore through that explanation, and the reason I didn't want to talk about these is because they feel like the wrong product at the wrong time, doing the wrong things in the wrong ways with the wrong software, right? Like that's you can't get that many things wrong at this time and place and still hope to serve customers next year. So happy to move on to the next subject here.
Yeah, no, I kind of very broadly agree with you here. It seems to me that these things were built for the history books. They were built literally so that someone somewhere has to write technically the first standalone glasses in standalone form factor with micro LED displays that could do 6DoF AR was TCL's RayNeo X2. That's what it feels like. It doesn't feel like these are actually made for an ideal customer in mind. And I think we will see much better versions of what this does in terms of HUD glasses from bigger companies next year.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear us sort of delineate. We're trying to buy into that language out there of smart glasses, HUD glasses, and then AR glasses. I don't really buy into the idea that they're all gonna survive, but maybe, I don't know, like, we'll see. But let's talk about the final one on our list of topics for today. That would be the Snap Spectacles, latest generation here. Got to go hands-on in a demo here in New York with these bulky frames on my face. And I wrote an article about the Peridot experience on there, Peridot Beyond. I also talked about golfing 1-to-1. These glasses can use an iPhone as a tracked object, basically. So I used the iPhone as a club and putted my way, chipped my way. It was a puttering or chipping. I can't remember. I think I got to change clubs, and they showed me both clubs in my quick little demo. The eye-opening thing for me, we covered it on the Gamescast, David. I'll let you run through the specs here to give everyone the numbers out there. Yes, it's thick. Yes, it's bigger and more visible than the ones you just showed, and way out of the realm of social acceptance compared to the Ray-Bans. Yes, all those things are true. But at the same time, this did open my eyes to the idea that properly framed content in something that has this minimum field of view could be pretty darn compelling with all the things that the last subject got wrong. If you get all of those things right, you might actually have something interesting for developers to play with. And that's what I felt like I saw with this product. So why don't you run through the numbers here and the facts of what this product is, and then I'll come back a little bit to the discussion here with you.
Sure. So, as you say, this thing does fix a lot of the problems that we just discussed when it comes to those RayNeo glasses. So, yes, these Snap spectacles are, twice the weight, and they're bulkier, and they, as you say, they push beyond social acceptability for what you would wear outdoors, but they're more focused on this true augmented reality experience of bringing these virtual objects in a compelling way. And so, compared to those 25-degree field of view glasses we just talked about, these Snap spectacles have 46 degrees. So you're just below the likes of HoloLens 2 and Magic Leap 1 and X-Real glasses, just about in that same zone, significantly below mixed reality headsets, but just to the point where you can start to do some of these use cases in a compelling way. The resolution here is 37 pixels per degree, so roughly on par with Apple Vision Pro. So text readability is not going to be a problem with these things. In the web browser, for example, you should still be able to read articles and smaller text like that. Snap says that this uses 2 Snapdragon processors from Qualcomm, one in each stem, but they wouldn't confirm to us exactly which chipset this is. We'll have to keep pushing further on that in the coming weeks and months. They say that in addition to that solution of splitting the thermal and compute load between the 2 stems, they also use titanium vapor chambers to cool this thing. And so this thing should have significantly more processing power than those glasses we just talked about. They claim that there is a 13 millisecond motion to photon latency here. So virtual objects should look like they are pinned to the position they're in. That's below the 20 milliseconds generally accepted for human perceptual full believability. There are some specs about this, though, that are really not close to any serious product. And one of them is the battery life. So this thing has a battery life of 45 minutes, which is very low and stretches viability. But you can extend it by connecting a power bank in your pocket or anywhere else to a USB-C port at the back of the stem. Now, the one thing we really should make clear about this is not a consumer product. The glasses we talked about with RayNeo were a product you could buy. These things are being offered to developers to rent for $99 a month with a 1-year minimum term. And if they choose to stop subscribing, stop paying that $99 a month, they have to give them back to Snap. So if you look at this all in its context, the fact that these have a 45-minute battery life, that these are $99 a month for developers, the design and form factor, I think it's clear that we are at least a few years away from a real consumer product here from Snap, and that this is the beginning of their journey. They did have some previous AR spectacles for developers, but they were much lower spec, more similar to the ones we just talked about, and yet in a uglier design, whereas this is the one I think they just get past the specs other than battery life, where there's a compelling product to be had here. And in the years to come, they're going to figure out, how do we make this cheaper? How do we make this sleeker? And how do we dramatically increase that battery life through both hardware and software efficiency gains? The only last thing I want to say about this is just that when it comes to that input problem I talked about before, Snap's solution here is to use high quality hand tracking to pin a virtual menu to your hand that you interact with the other hand. So you're not using some touchpad, you're actually using a 6 DOF hand lock menu. And I think that's a really interesting solution that I'm keen to try, and you can tell me about very shortly. They also have speech recognition. And as you mentioned, you can use your phone as a 6 DOF controller in certain games as well. So very interested to see the input solution here. From a specs perspective, this product seems to just get past that line. Why don't you tell us about what you thought of when you tried it hands-on?
Yeah, I think we'll move to the end of the show here pretty quickly. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Tune in next week for all of the coverage on UploadVR.com as we cover everything with MetaConnect. Thank you to David for the incredible work covering everything, getting everything in order. It's going to be a stressful time for us. It's always a stressful time around Connect. And that's because a lot of eyes start seeing the future all at the same time. We'll see a little bit into the future. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but it hits us all at once and it's kind of overwhelming. And at the same time, this is going to be my 10th year going to Connect. I'm very lucky to have been getting to go every year, get to see this whole journey where from the beginning, I saw all those people in that audience looking at this future like we're still looking at now. And it's been a bummer because not everyone has been able to go to Connect. They've like shut down how many people get invites over the years. But that means we're going to see the next steps. And before that, Snap has chosen to show me this. They've chosen to show me the best AR they can offer here in 2024. As you point out, it's very bulky, very big. But as I mentioned, it did open my eyes. The 6DOF controller with the iPhone was a really cool idea. It worked. It didn't feel as responsive as a true like track controller, as like a Quest track controller. Didn't feel as responsive as that, but it felt usable to hold the iPhone and golf club with it. The one thing that didn't feel usable with that particular I mean, it was usable, but the field of view. You look over on the other side of the room and you see a portal to your golfing room, and it's cut off on the sides, and that's standard for all environmental effects in every kind of AR glasses there are today. You're still going to get the environment getting cut off. And I'm coming around. We talked about the word immersive earlier in the show. We're actually going to have to start protecting the word immersive for VR, I think, a little bit more, because that's not what works on these glasses. Environmental effects don't work well on HoloLens, Magic Leap, or even these with limited effects. What does work well is a little creature about yay big standing there in the middle of the room. We talked about this on VR Gamescast, and I loved the Peridot creature in this experience. It was fantastic. A sense of presence to being in my room that creature had with me. I felt earlier this summer when I tried out Bernie's new project at Wind Up Minds, the follow-up project to BOGO. I had a virtual creature in my presence in Quest 3, and it was the same sort of thing. It was mixed reality, I think, even then, but I got this early look at this virtual pet concept that's coming to Quest 3. Same overall idea here, same effect for me as a person to feel like there's this creature that is right there, fully realized. None of it is cut off on the edges. And I could look at it, move around, and its eyes follow me as if it's right actually there. It's a powerful feeling and a big space for developers to play in. Developers can really toy with that and build with it. But I don't know that a consumer market is going to jumpstart that just yet until developers go and build something with these glasses that follow some of these ideas. Snap and Niantic had been suggesting that down the line, this paired experience could potentially have multiplayer, that you could log in and see other people's pets. The larger sense I got from this, David, like, was that if you look at a game like Pokemon Go, I don't think I feel like the leadership at Niantic know that that is the model that they want to reach. They want to figure out how to do everything you can do in Pokemon Go actually in a headset of some kind. They do have that vision somewhere. I don't think anyone at Niantic, Snap, Meta, any of these experts, product designers, any of them for sure know which headset line it's going to be first, right? Like, which is going to be the right fit for the right parts of those games first. You've got battling, you've got trading, you've got chance encounters with other people that lead to those things. You've got battles with AIs and towards the environment. You've got routes you can go on through the environment, surprise things that pop up into your space. That's like 7 or 8 different dynamic mechanics, all realized in different Pokemon games, but not all of them are applicable to these AR glasses in the near future, and not all of them are applicable to the VR headsets in the near future. And we're going to have to figure out here in the next 2 to 3 years which ones are going to be the right fits, the right headsets. The reason I say all that, David, is we know how big of a game Pokemon Go is. We know it's a billion-dollar enterprise, and they know it too, right? So there is the very real like situation here that it was really cool to see Niantic and Snap team up on this product together. To see these two platforms show that actually they have a shared interest in realizing everyday chance encounters with strangers in a way that doesn't require a Meta account, right? And that's one of the things Snap is trying to show with these glasses, that you can use these spectacles with a separate account to your main Snapchat account, I believe. And that's a really interesting thing to have still in place this far into their development cycle. Because we've talked about this on other shows, David, in different ways. As great as it is to log into your Apple ID and bring along all of the content that is ingested in that account to your Vision Pro, it's also a detriment to the platform to require that. Like, you won't go use that headset to its fullest because you don't have any investment in that same thing, right? Well, the same thing is true of Meta accounts and Facebook accounts, right? We're starting fresh in our minds in Meta accounts, and we don't have to think of all the baggage anymore attached to our Facebook accounts in going to adopt that. It's actually a great, smart thing that Meta has done for itself in giving people that fresh start in AR and VR. Well, what I think's the most interesting thing here, the space to watch into the future, is what do Snap and Niantic do going into the future? Does a platform like Apple show up and spend $5 billion, $10 billion to get exclusivity for a year or two for this one game on one specific platform? Or does Niantic and Snap, do they figure out a way that everyone gets to have this trading experience, this battling experience, this everything else that Pokemon offers? It's really close, David. Like this, I wrote that article in 2021 that imagined AR as a guide for us for decades to come, as like Pokemon being the guide. I feel like it's actually on a timeline within a decade now after seeing this demo.
Yeah, just to come back on what you were saying about field of view and Pokemon, I think it really is interesting to think about Pokemon Go as this metric, as you say. Which Pokemon could you show in a room without part of their body being completely cut off to the point that you can't see them, right? And I think you brought up in our internal discussion this idea that some of the larger Pokemon, if you tried to just look at them in glasses like this, you would just be seeing different parts of their body as you looked around, and you would never see the full Pokemon itself. And I think that really will define the limits of these devices for years and years to come. So when it comes to Snap spectacles, they are just below what you see in these X-Rail glasses. And you can see how RayNeo X2 is even smaller. And the one thing that this chart always highlights to me is just how far these devices are from getting to where Quest headsets are today. And then this is going to be a moving target, right? By the time there are viable consumer products in glasses form factor with transparent optics, we could see mixed reality headsets getting wider and wider field of view, or they could stay roughly the same and start getting slimmer and lighter to the point where they approach the weight of these glasses in the first place. That's something that we've seen from the report recently that said Meta is planning to release mixed reality glasses in 2027 that would actually be lighter than Snap's AR glasses today. So you start to see a possible future where AR glasses are not only trying to get their cost dramatically down and their field of view up, but are facing competition from these mixed reality headsets that could have really, really good pass through compared to what we have today and keep that wide field of view and all of the other advantages that come from having, as you know, Meta always says, this full control of pixels where each pixel is completely under control of the camera. You can do those immersive environment effects. You're not limited by transparency. You're not limited by field of view, and you're not trying to push a 45-minute battery life.
Yeah, so the battery life can be extended, so you can plug it in and get full day battery life if you want. I'm assuming there's still going to be hard heat restrictions on that to limit use. I know you got to go and we got to move on to the end of this show. I want to leave a note to mention Fantastic Contraption. I was talking with James, one of our audience members out there, frequently watches our shows. I was hanging out with him, and he mentioned Fantastic Contraption, and it was a fantastic call out because there were two UI user interface ideas in that original game, Fantastic Contraption, on the Vive. You put a helmet on to go to your menu system. It was such a cool idea. You access all of your contraptions by putting a virtual helmet on. You get to this whole other world. Well, that's the benefit of VR headsets, right? Is that ability to put on a virtual helmet and go to a whole other place. But there was another UI idea in Fantastic Contraption that I've forgotten about, and it was a great span of time. But do you remember the little farting cat that followed you around? I loved the little farting cat that followed you around in Fantastic Contraption. It's a wonderful sentence. And that's what it feels like AR could really offer in the near future, is a little farting cat that can follow you around. And it's such a silly, stupid idea, but like it's a UI idea that I think has has really long legs to carry us into the future. Because if you can imagine accessorizing a virtual pet and having it have superpowers to grow all of your other UI out of.
Yeah, I think if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is that there are clever design practices that can be used to work around this limited field of view. And as you say, Peridot is a perfect example of that. And there are a lot of also potential possibilities where you solve the problem of these objects not being there when you're looking at them by having something that draws your attention and moves you over to the point of attention. So you have this virtual pet, as you say, that could even guide you over to what you need to look at and kind of play within that. And that's what Snap's going to be hoping that these developers do, right? I've seen some developers push back at Snap's pricing here and say, hang on, you have no consumer market here. This isn't a consumer product, and you want us to pay to build for your platform that doesn't have any clear consumer market. Some are arguing that they should be giving these out to certain developers.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you run into the fact of who do they choose and what happens if you're not chosen. That has its own set of problems. But I do think we're going to see over the next few years these developers build up these skills that are similar in some ways to the skill for building mixed reality for Quest 3 and Vision Pro, but also dramatically different in other ways, as you're pointing out.
Yeah.
And I don't think the timing is a coincidence of Snap's announcement here, in that we expect next week Meta to unveil its own pair of AR glasses, but making even less of them and not even selling them, just having them sent out to very few developers so that they can build up those skills, so that by the time that Meta and Snap and companies like Apple perhaps can release AR glasses, there is a group of developers out there in the world that actually have experience building the experiences that people will want on them.
No, you just described something, David, quite profound here in the show that I didn't even really put two and two together here. But that is how different AR is, and how different what we get out of these glasses is going to be from our existing paradigms. We can only think of little pointing arrows on the street as the paradigm in our heads for how the maps are going to tell us where to go. But what you just described in your feedback of like what I'm understanding here and how I'm seeing the future here is you would just follow your pet, right? Like the pet would know where to go, and the UI is you following it to your destination. So it's like you talk to your pet and tell it, "I want to go here," and you just follow it, right? Like it's an instinctive UI or instinctual UI that is going to be quite different than everything you've had before. I was afraid of trying to do this demonstration and getting it wrong, so I guess we could cut it out if it doesn't work. But imagine this field of view as the field of view of the AR glasses, and the field of view of the spectacles being about right here, somewhere in this small region here. If I'm looking around at a little pet on the ground, the pet is perfect right here, right? But I look over here, or I look over here, right? I look over here, and the pet is over here. When I look over here, arc connects between the pet and where I'm looking over here. And I see, still within this limited field of view, a dot, dot, dot line curving off to tell me that my peridot is over here where I was just looking at it a minute ago. So even though I'm looking over here, I still have a small UI indication of where my pet is. Think about the break in our brains that causes. We thought the arrows were for us. The arrows are for the pet to tell us where the pet is, so the pet can tell us where to go, right? Like that's the type of things we have to break our brains around, and the developers building with this are going to discover exactly how to do this. I hope that demonstration made sense, and it actually pointed out that it's a really, really cool space for us to think about in the near future. We're going to be watching it very, very closely. Thank you, like I said, to David for the time here. We're going to have all the latest news for you on UploadVR.com as quickly as we can possibly manage it. We are all traveling. We're all going to be stressed. We're all excited to see the future. At the same time, it's a very powerful feeling to kind of like know you're seeing the next 2 to 3 years of everyone's future shown for us on that stage. So we're excited to have that moment with you, everyone out there in the audience, seeing the next steps in personal computing. Thank you to our audience and our members who were there in the comments. We'll be back in the studio with the next show as soon as we possibly can. We'll be putting together our plan for coverage next week as it happens. We'll see you in the future. Thanks you so much.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future.